Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. We start tonight with tragic news out of 6 nations of the Grand River, where one person has died from COVID-19. That is the first known death of a person in an Indigenous community. 6 Nations has been the hardest hit community during the pandemic to date. Health officials are dealing with 8 positive cases. Elsewhere in Canada, Ganawage Mohawk Territory, south of Montreal, is dealing with 5 cases. In Nunavik, the Canadian Rangers have been dispatched to help the 14 Inuit communities fight the spread of the virus. There are 5 cases in 3 Innu communities in Quebec. There are 3 cases in 2 communities in Saskatchewan, and 2 communities in the Northwest Territories each have a confirmed case. We're told that a number of communities in northern British Columbia have positive cases, but we haven't identified them yet, and officials aren't naming them. At this moment, Quebec leads all provinces and territories with 10,912 cases. Ontario is next with 5,759 cases. In all, 503 people have died from the coronavirus. A total of 4,062 people have recovered from having COVID-19, but not all provinces report the number of people who recover. Go to aptnnews.ca and click on our special page for more information. As we mentioned, Canada's largest First Nation has announced its first COVID-19 related death. In a Facebook video Wednesday evening, 6 Nations Chief Mark Hill said the death comes 2 weeks after the first confirmed case on March 28th. Chief Hill pleaded for his community to keep safe.
Our community is grieving today, and our hearts and prayers are with the family. We need to strengthen our efforts to slow the rate of transmission, and we urge everyone to stay home, especially with the Easter weekend fast approaching. When all of this is over, we will hold each other close. But right now, we need to show unimaginable strength and do everything in our power to ensure we do not lose any more lives.
The federal government today said Canadians can expect to see measures like social distancing enforced for quite a long time yet. And they released their data on health models that show how many people could be infected and perish from COVID-19. Jamie Pashigumskum has that story.
Canada's healthcare system is coping so far with the COVID-19 crisis. But federal government health models show that between 4,000 and 44,000 people could perish from COVID-19 before this crisis is over. The Prime Minister predicts, with the best possible scenario, the infection rate could curb in late spring, and the heavy restrictions imposed on Canadians will be lifted sometime this summer.
It will take months of continued, determined effort. We'll need to keep practicing physical distancing, staying home, and washing our hands. It will help. It will help get the numbers that Dr. Tam was talking about, between 4,000 and 44,000 deaths, as low as possible.
The Prime Minister called this new world of social distancing the new normal, and we can expect subsequent waves of infections until a vaccine is found.
Hello, everyone.
Canada's Chief Medical Officer, Theresa Tam, said to date there are 461 deaths in Canada from COVID-19. By next week, that number could jump to around 700. She said Canadians need to maintain their resolve and continue emergency measures.
I recognize that these changes in our daily lives that we are asking people to make are extremely difficult. Despite the hardships, we are all in this together. Canadians' collective effort to slow the spread has allowed our health system to cope, and that means we're protecting health services for everyone. So, during important religious observances, including Passover, Easter, Vaisakhi, and Ramadan, we need to not let down our guard.
Tam said dinners and celebrations this weekend need to be strictly limited to existing household members only. She did say the infection rate is slowing down, but we won't know when we will get over the peak until we are already past it. Jamie Pashigumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
It's been a deadly 24 hours in Winnipeg. City police shot and killed 2 people in separate incidents, which began Wednesday night, one of them being a 16-year-old Indigenous girl. Now, a family is left wondering what happened. Brittany Hobson brings us that story.
Aisha Hudson was the youngest of 7 siblings. The 16-year-old was a devoted daughter.
Aisha was a smart child. She never wanted to let me down. She was always gun-ho. I'm not letting mom down. I'm not letting mom down.
Christy Zabrowski last saw her daughter Wednesday morning. Several hours later, she would get some troubling news.
Her girlfriend messaged me and told me that Aisha was in trouble.
By the evening, Hudson was shot and killed by Winnipeg police. Chief of Police Danny Smythe said officers responded to a liquor store robbery in the south end of the city when 5 teen suspects took off in a stolen vehicle.
During the pursuit, the stolen vehicle collided with several other vehicles before the pursuit ended at the intersection of Lagimodier and Fermor Avenue.
Police say when officers attempted to arrest the suspects, Hudson was shot.
Generally speaking, use of force or deadly use of force is appropriate when an officer fears for their own life or the life and safety of others. That's a real general answer. In this particular case, it will be up to IAU to determine what was occurring as those officers approached the vehicle.
The Independent Investigation Unit of Manitoba is tasked with looking into the shooting and declined to provide further details at this time. This leaves a community and a mother with many unanswered questions.
Why did they draw a gun on my daughter? Why did they shoot?
In a separate incident, police shot and killed a man in the city's north end early Thursday morning in what they say was a domestic incident. Police say they found the man with a gun in the home. The IIU is also investigating that shooting. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To Northern Ontario now, where Fort William First Nation is tightening up access to their community as they try to keep COVID-19 out. When the idea was recently floated, it led to long lineups at local gas bars as thousands of residents from neighboring Thunder Bay visit the community every day. In a Facebook Live video message Tuesday, Chief Peter Collins said it was a unanimous decision by Council. As of Friday, non-residents will not be allowed into the community, and all retail businesses like gas stations will be closed. Collins said they will review the shutdown in 2 weeks.
As we see the numbers grow in Ontario, as we see the numbers grow in Thunder Bay District, it's a very challenging time for us, and I know the numbers, we haven't had any cases in Fort William, and I thank God for that. As of today, still no cases in the community of Fort William, and we want to keep it that way. We need your support, and we need your help to guide us through this situation. At the end of the day, I mean, God forbid we lose anybody, but we're going to do everything in the power of your leadership and your senior management to do what we have to do to protect this community.
The federal government has announced a new legislation for banned elections. The move comes as First Nations grapple with whether or not to hold elections during the COVID-19 pandemic. Angel Moore reports.
Indigenous Services Canada dug into Section 73F of the Indian Act and implemented regulations for Chief and Council to extend their terms, therefore postponing elections and avoiding the governance gap, another option for First Nations. Regional Chief Kluani Adamek says it's important to look at the bigger picture.
For nations to be the ones to determine, of course, what leadership selection looks like, however that may look, and to go to the community for the community's response in terms of, do we move forward now or do we move forward at a later time? Asking our people what's going to work for us.
Council can also appoint a delegate or hold their elections. Pabineau First Nation chose the election. Councillor Terry Richardson said new leadership was needed.
So it was becoming very difficult. So we said, how can we do this? Still move forward, have the community move forward, and make sure that we're in a situation where we can actually have leadership that's going to lead us through this pandemic.
Richardson said at the end of the day, Pabineau 100 voting community members will make that choice. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Jabottuk, Halifax.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll check in on British Columbia, where 2 states of emergency are underway.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and here's what we're working on for Nation to Nation. Think things are bad here in Canada? The COVID-19 pandemic is turning out to be devastating for Native Americans in the U.S. As well, I speak to the health officials for Indigenous Services. They insist that everything that can be done is being done to stop the virus from spreading in Indigenous communities. And the Member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre may be self-isolating, but Leah Gazan is using social media to keep her constituents informed. That's all coming up after the national news.
Here's a look at your Good Friday weather forecast starting on the East Coast. +4 with showers for Halifax, 4 above and snow for Fredericton, 0 with snow for Nain and Cartwright, +2 for Happy Valley Goose Bay, showers and 7 in Montreal, +2 and snow for Saguenay, +7 with showers for Toronto, snow and 4 above in Ottawa, snow and +3 in Thunder Bay, sunny skies and 3 above in Sioux Lookout. -10 in Churchill, 4 below with snow for God's Lake, +1 in Winnipeg, 9 above in Brandon. +8 in Regina under sunny skies, 7 above for Yorkton, +1 with snow in Meadow Lake, 0 in La Roque. Welcome back to Vancouver now, where officials have 2 states of emergency to deal with. One for the ongoing opioid epidemic, and now the COVID-19 pandemic. The city has promised help for those less fortunate. However, as Tina House reports, many are saying no help has arrived.
It's now week 3 since the pandemic was announced, and those on the front lines say very little has changed, despite assurances from officials that a safe drug supply and even hotel rooms have been secured for homeless people. So far, no one down here knows anything about those promises. In fact, things are getting worse, according to Trey Helton. He manages one of Vancouver's safe injection sites. At Vancouver's Overdose Prevention Society, there used to be 24 injection and inhalation areas for the public to use. Now, since the social distancing rules, there are only 7.
It means less chances of being revived in a fatal overdose if they use alone or unsafely.
Last week, Vancouver recorded 8 fatal overdoses, the second deadliest week since that state of emergency was ordered in 2017. One of those was Helton's own staff member, 39-year-old Leaf Bridgman.
He was a stimulant user. He only smoked crack cocaine and crystal meth, and he got a contaminated batch of crack.
Sadly, he wasn't discovered for 48 hours. Helton also says people's lives are further at risk who live in the single-room occupancy rooms all along the downtown east side.
In the SROs, it's a dangerous situation because of COVID-19. There's a no visitor, no guest policy. So if you wanted to use in your room alone and maybe have like the buddy system going, you don't even have that option anymore. And due to like the sites running at less capacity, a lot of people aren't coming out, right? So I know for a fact, like one of the deaths of our staff members is a result of the no guest policy and people using alone because there's less tables.
We have 2 public health emergencies in the downtown east side. While we've been able to stave off so far the spread of COVID-19, overdoses were up.
Janice Abbott is the CEO of Atira Women's Resource Society. She says COVID-19 has definitely changed the way they operate.
At Atira, we're still doing health and wellness checks, which means if we haven't seen somebody in 24 hours, we go knock on the door. We will open the door now, even if someone has symptoms or is symptomatic. We don't have any confirmed cases of COVID-19 yet. So we're continuing to do that, but every nonprofit is going to do things a bit differently, and we are concerned about what happens when we do start to have people who are confirmed positive.
For others who are barely making ends meet, like Chris, He says life was hard before COVID-19, and now it's even harder.
I used to panhandle the hockey games and stuff like that with no events and no money. So there's a lot of, I'm collecting bottles and stuff like that, but it's hard because I'm disabled.
Here on the streets, Helton says the drug supply continues to dwindle, with the border being shut down and stricter rules for flying means less drugs coming into Canada.
The price has gone up, and I'm assuming that the drug supply is getting more contaminated, right? I mean, we need drug testing back. Right now there's no drug testing. Vancouver Coastal Health has shut down the spectrometer system. So that's a big thing that we need back that we're asking for.
I think I've done about 20 samples and I've only found it once. But that one time is what's going to take somebody out, so to say, probably cause them to overdose.
It works with an infrared light that shines a light onto a small crystal, and all the components in the drug will show up on this laptop. Along with worrying about COVID-19, the loss of those spectrometer machines are now also leaving users to play Russian roulette every time they score more street drugs. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Tough situation there. British Columbia has announced even stricter rules to keep people away from each other this Easter weekend, and those rules will continue indefinitely. All provincial parks are now closed until further notice. Vancouver's Stanley Park Drive is closed to all cars to allow bicycles and pedestrians to maintain social distancing. Over on Cypress Mountain, they've taken it a step further, and no one is allowed to walk or cycle. But people in the city seem to be taking the new restrictions in stride.
Yeah, this doesn't bother me at all. This is what it takes. You know, social distancing, this is what has to happen to get rid of this thing, and then we can all get back to our lives.
The largest university in northern BC will be holding their graduation this spring, but because of COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, it will be a virtual one. The University of Northern British Columbia felt it was important for graduating students to have their milestone acknowledged. Graduates will have a chance to submit personal videos or photos that will play when their names and degrees are called. The online ceremony will take place June 26th.
We decided yesterday that we would go with a virtual convocation, which would allow some certainty and clarity that the students would know when they could have their celebration. Received some feedback from students and from parents and from the community. I did then reflect on that and made the decision to move forward and have both events. We'll have the traditional face-to-face convocation when the date allows us to do that.
I think there's going to be a lot of virtual ceremonies this year. A new episode of APTN Investigates debuts Friday night. We'll speak with the reporter after the break. Here's the rest of Friday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 0 in Peace River and Grand Prairie. +8 with showers for Medicine Hat, 14 above in Calgary. +14 under sunny skies for Vancouver and Victoria. 0 in Fort Nelson, +7 for Smithers. -3 with snow in Old Crow, +1 in Whitehorse. +2 for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 6 below and snow in Yellowknife. 11 below for Sax Harbor, -6 in Inuvik. -11 in Repulse Bay and Arviette, 15 below for Chesterfield. 10 below in Igloolik, -18 in Joe Haven. Welcome back. Centralization of Mi'kmaq nations in the 40s and 50s had a devastating impact on their way of life. Video journalist Trina Roach dug into a little-known history for her latest episode, A Relocation Experiment. Trina joins us now from Halifax. And I guess Trina isn't joining us right now from Halifax. We'll try and get her on the line here again right now. And I'm going to say that we're probably not going to get Trina. The episode, a Relocation Experiment, does debut tomorrow night on APTN Investigates, right after the APTN National News. And now I'm told we have Trina Roach. Trina, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us what is centralization?
Centralization was a policy that was created by Indian Affairs in the 1940s to relocate Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia at that time to two central reserves. One in Shubenacadie on the mainland, and in Cape Breton, they wanted all the Mi'kmaq to move to Eskasoni. At that time, the Mi'kmaq were sort of spread throughout the province on roughly 45 reserves and settlements, and often camped near cities and towns and railways, so they could access jobs and markets for their baskets and crafts that they would sell. And so, the goal for Indian Affairs was really to save money. They wanted to cut down on the number of Indian agents, but also really just to push the Mi'kmaq out of sight and out of mind.
So what was the impact?
Well, at that time, the Mi'kmaq were still practicing traditional activities. They were hunting and fishing. They had adapted their Mi'kmaq, their economy to access those markets and cities, to sell hockey sticks. They were very skilled at stuff like that, and baskets. And so they had, they were poor for sure, but they had a way of making a living. And centralization really disrupted that. It disrupted ties to land, traditional territories, kinship ties, and the economy for the Mi'kmaq that they had developed. And there was almost an immediate rise in welfare rates, and that trend just continued. And that a lot of Mi'kmaq really trace that to the start of centralization.
So what do the elders have to say about it today?
A lot of the elders who lived through centralization have since died. But there's still elders who are alive today who remember it, or they remember their parents talking about it. And they really want people to know what happened, because it's not a well-known chapter in history. And for the Mi'kmaq who lived through it, the hardship and the impact that it had, they put it right up there with residential school, Indian day schools, those kind of colonial policies. They put that up there with this. And so they want people to understand the context. So when we're talking about issues today, even for the Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia, often we'll say the generational impacts of residential school. Well, they want people to also say the generational impacts of centralization. And so that's one of the goals that I hope to do with this doc, is just to let people know what happened.
Well, Trina, thanks for helping bring it to light and for doing this interview with us today.
Thanks, Dennis.
Glad we got Trina there, and you can watch that episode right here tomorrow night after the APTN News. And that's your APTN National News for this Thursday. Stay up to date with the very latest on COVID-19 by visiting our special APTN News page. Stick around. Todd Lamoran's next. Have a good night.